Welcome to Under the Rug at Work, where we shine light on issues that are normally swept under the rug. Today, I'm chatting with David Laarhoven
Welcome to Under
about
the
what
Rug at
to
Work,
do
where we
before the
shine light
alarm
on issues
sounds.
that are normally swept under the
Preparing for
rug.
emergencies often
Today,
gets
I'm chatting
brushed
with
off as
David
a box to
Laarhoven
tick,
about
but there's
what
so
to do
much
before
more
the
than
alarm
just
sounds.
evacuations and fire wardens.
Preparing for
And Dave
emergencies
brings
often gets
decades of
brushed off as
experience
a
from
box to
emergency
tick,
services,
but there's so
domestic and
much
family
more
violence,
than
and
just
frontline
evacuations
response.
and fire
And he's on a
wardens.
mission to make sure
And Dave
workplaces
brings
are
decades of
really ready when
experience
things
from
go wrong.
emergency services, domestic and family violence, and frontline response. And he's on a mission to make sure workplaces are really ready when things go wrong. Dave's a firefighter, an emergency trainer and assessor, and founder of GetFIRE.Training. Thank you so much for joining me, Dave.
Nicole, thanks for having me. I love being on the podcast.
Yes, and this is a topic that I haven't spoken about before, and you are the perfect person, the expert to dive into this. But before we do, can you tell us a bit about your background and experience?
I think you said a lot there. I'm an emergency services worker. I have had a background in communities and justice with domestic and family violence and family and community services. I've worked in disaster welfare roles for recovery and even emergency evacuation centres. But yeah, I'm a passionate community member, and I'm just seen so many alarms, so many triggers, so many emergencies where we've turned up to workplaces, and unfortunately, things haven't gone as well as what they definitely should have.
Mm. Yeah, so why did you start Get Fire Training, and what does the word fire actually stand for? Because when you hear it and see it, you obviously think fire, but there's more to it than that.
So why I started, and there's a couple of us, there's a few firefighters and a paramedic in our crew, a
Mhm.
team that deliver the training. And of course, fire is not always the workplace incident. About 80% of workplace incidences are all the other internal emergencies or external emergencies, but just less than 12% are actually code reds or fire.
Mm.
And we train these fire wardens. People talk about fire wardens, but it's only 12% of the job. And why I and we have really done that, I used to train for fire and rescue at workplace emergency training, and for a number of years, and saw a void in the across New South Wales to be able to do that, and others just like me. So um, the FIRE is not just all about fire. So it's get fire, but it's fire, I for incident, F for fire, I for incident, R for response, and E for evacuation. So incidences can be thousands of different things. The response is how the ECO team, and that's what the real terminology for the wardens are, so the chief warden, the area warden, and so on, and how they respond can really play a big part in the overall calm and the outcome in
Mhm.
an evacuation or an emergency situation. And the evacuation is all about how that's facilitated as well. So some of our clients, we don't want them to evacuate, particularly in the health sector where they have passive systems like all the fire doors and the compartmentation, and certainly people that might be in the latter stages of care or in a theatre under anaesthesia, you're not evacuating those sort of people. You're managing the situation using the controlled systems and keeping people calm, and if need be, moving them or staged evacuations within the facility.
Mm. That's so interesting. And I mean, you've shared that stat. So most people think that emergency preparedness is just about evacuations and fire wardens, but that's 12%. What else is really involved when it comes to that?
It's all about, first of all, every business as a PCBU, a personal business conducting an undertaking, must have an emergency plan. And sometimes that emergency plan is a 2-page document because it's a coffee cart, you
Mm.
know. But if it's a high risk workplace, and we document and we review those documents for workplaces on an annual basis, and some of them are hundreds of pages. Now, do the whole staff get to read that document? No, they don't. And even from an induction purpose, does the workplace do, just that occupant training? So should you hear the alarm, this is your responsibility to listen, be responsive, take
Mhm.
take notice of what the chief warden is saying, and follow those orders, and move to the evacuation area where that particular evacuation area might be as well. A lot of places, people walk into work and go, great, get to work. They hear the alarm,
Mm.
and then what do I do? Where do I go? Who's who in the zoo? So, and that's when, unfortunately, those psychosocial risks
Mm.
can turn into physical risks because people are delayed in the evacuation, or they become traumatized because of the event itself.
Yeah. There's so many organizations. I'm just going back to the organizations that I've worked in, and the information around emergencies and what to do. Like, you just basically shared what we did. You'd see it go off, or hear the alarm go off, and you go, "Oh, is this real? Do we have to go? I've got to get my bag," and no one kind of takes it seriously. But preparing for emergencies isn't just a tick box. What risks, and you kind of highlighted one of them there, but what risks do businesses and workers face when people don't have the right training?
Well, they represent a human risk, don't they?
Mm.
Because that emergencies don't just test the systems, they test the resilience and the cohesion of the people.
Yeah.
So you can get heightened anxiety and panic. You can get the loss of trust in leadership. You can get the moral injury and guilt.
Hmm.
There can be workplace tension and blame when
Hmm.
things go wrong. So those sort of risks can then turn into delayed or disorganized evacuations. It can be failure to use the safety equipment properly. Even reading an evacuation diagram or knowing where the emergency doors are and not putting obstructions in them, using a fire extinguisher. So the increased risk of vulnerable individuals as well. Every person that walks into a workplace is not always ambulant. So
Hmm.
if an emergency goes off, how are they evacuated? If they've got a walking frame, or they've got a cognitive disorder, or they've got even just traumatized from emergencies previously, they acted differently. So, those ECO members need to assist. But at the end of the day as well, if, there is that blame and tension from the workplace emergency that's gone wrong, you can
Mm.
get secondary trauma and
Mm.
absenteeism as well. So
Mm.
the ECO team, the Emergency Control Organisation, cohesion, communication is key, and you know, just being prepared, having that understanding of what is the obligations under the Workplace Health and Safety Act, but particularly Regulation 43, the duty to prepare. That's the workplace
Hmm.
having to have all of that uh, training, all of the emergency preparedness plan in place, and actually putting it into action and doing drills occasionally so that people have that prior knowledge of what an emergency looks like.
Yeah. And you've got to do all those what if scenarios, like you said, right? What if someone comes in and they're in a wheelchair, for example? What if someone comes in and we have an emergency and they have been traumatized in the past? Well, who is best to deal with these things? We can't just leave it to chance, because the worst case scenario is that there's a serious injury or death. And then, as you said, that comes with psychosocial and physical harm, and the links to that is incredible, but we don't think about these things until it happens. And that's what I love about you and your business, and how, and your passion for it as well, is um, you know doing that beforehand and being prepared beforehand. Because what happens is, in an emergency, we do the best we can with what we've got, but sometimes people freeze or they panic. And what's your advice on how to build real, capability and confidence? Not just having that 100-page document and saying, right, we've checked that box, no one knows about it, but we've got it in case the regulator comes.
Yeah, and exactly. You must have all that information there prepared, and just while you spoke about if the regulator comes, they'll look to make sure that you've got the emergency plan, and not just if it was written in 2016 and hasn't been reviewed. You must have it reviewed annually and post any incident, and that could be even, water inundation. How did we manage that? The power outage that came out of that. What did we do good? What didn't we do so good? What could we do better? Looking at the plan, maybe doing a revision, and you must revise those. And there's version control on the bottom of those emergency plans. So making sure that they're not just, that's the same tick, change of version control. Go through the emergency planning committee, having a look at what workplace incidences might have happened and see how you can change that. Now, coming back to your other point was about, we call it leadership under pressure. So the ECO members are the first responders until the fire brigade or police or paramedics turn up, aren't they? Yeah. So in regional areas, and this is where I'm concerned, in regional areas, unlike the city, metropolitan areas, where there's all these, mobile ambulances running around everywhere. There's lots of police stations and lots of police and lots of fire brigades sitting there on 24-hour shifts ready to turn up. We're in regional areas and the response times are much greater. So where it might be 6 or 7 minutes to get something in the metropolitan area to the door to help the ECO, and 6 or 7 minutes, that's a lot of time for ECO members to manage the emergency and look after the health and well-being and the actual, knock the fire down or stop the electricity from surging or whatever. And then here we're looking at sometimes 50. I know myself, to try and get to the other side of, I live in Coffs Harbour, so to get to the other side of Coffs Harbour at certain times of the day, it can take me 30 minutes to get to the hospital from just driving a normal car. And now emergency services can't push people off the road. They have to wait for people to move and the traffic to sort of move as well. So they can be delayed. That can be 15, 20 minutes to get them there. So we teach assertive communication, which is a really important thing. And big places require UHF radios, or they require the use of the emergency warning intercommunication systems like the red whip phones. They need to remain calm and clear in their communication. You need to have that authoritative. I do a few reels on our Instagram and I try and use that same sort of tone. So if people want to have a look at that on our Instagram, they can. But scenario-based role play leadership moments. So drills. Every organisation must have a drill annually, but they all go, all right, we're going to have a fire drill and this is what it's going to look like. Unfortunately, that's 99% of the time people do fire drills. And how many times is it really a workplace emergency? Less than 12%. So look at some of the other things, so we have, and we'll probably talk about that, all the different Australian standards code colours, code red, code black, code purple, so on.
Can you share?
It's contagious, right?
Pardon?
Panic is contagious.
It is. And you want someone who you can follow. You want someone who knows what they're doing, who's structured and can tell you the best next step, not someone who is in panic mode themselves.
So nice, clear communication, using a PA system, using a megaphone, or even sometimes you might have to do, calm people down and ask them to do the right thing.
Yeah. And look, again, the workplaces that I've worked for have done their annual fire drill. I've never done a drill of any other type. And I honestly, because I haven't been involved in a committee of that type, I wasn't aware that there were other colors and that there were other things. Can you share with us just a bit about, what the color coding system is and what some of those other things mean for people who might be like me?
Yeah, well, look, Australian standards, we deal with Australian standards every day. Myself and yourself would deal with Australian standards. The chair that you're sitting on the computer that you're using, the ergonomics are Australian standards, the tires that you buy for your car, they're Australian standards. Well, there's actually an Australian standard 3745, which is done in 2010. It hasn't been revised since, and it's still active and current. And it's planning for emergencies in facilities. And in health, it's 4083. So that's for healthcare facilities. They're two different ones, but they're the two different ones. And there's a color code system. So you probably see on my screen here, the colors that are on that one, on that side. You'll see the blue, which is for a medical emergency. Now, that's something that people might have heard before, a code blue, because they use that in health. Now, if I was not wanting to announce it so that it sort of triggered people, or wanted to make sure that we kept it nice and tight, particularly if it was a code purple and it was a bomb threat, or a code black, we use that terminology so that there's a sense of calm instead of getting on. I recall this when I was a child. It's a long time ago, but when I was at school, and I went to what I thought was a fairly good school, and I know that it still is, but back in the day, you'd know when there was a bomb threat at school. It was usually through the school test times, like when there was a exam on, someone would get on the payphone, that's how long ago it was, and call in a bomb threat, and everyone would know about it in the school, and everyone would be out on the field. And people still talk about it these days, but there's lots of bomb threats that go on. There's lots of particularly code blacks, people with knives or weapons, or domestic situations that happen. And rather than really escalating it to the public, they use that color terminology. So code red's a pretty popular one. And when you look at anything fire based in an installation, like a red fire extinguisher or a red break glass alarm or whatever, they talk about fire. So that one's pretty particular. But look, it's about training to those standards. So we do an emergency flip guide, a procedures guide. So for some organizations, particularly if they don't have a really comprehensive plan, they can actually use the emergency services guide, which is just a flip chart. I did have one handy, but it has all of that information in it. And like for code blue, it just talks about your doctor's ABCD. So those of you that are first aiders will know, danger, response, send for help. It's just having that flip chart there. On the code black, it has information where there's a template where you draw the outline of it's got the outline of a person. You can say what sort of clothes they're wearing, what was the sound of their voice, was there any cultural accents, was there a time and a day that this happened? And it just gives you that pathway. So the Australian standards is a good thing. And I talk about this one too, Australian standards. When you buy stuff online, it's not Australian standards. So I'm a real big thing about lithium batteries at the moment. So that's another conversation we can have, and people buying inferior lithium batteries on the internet. But anyway.
Which is definitely a physical safety risk. And yes, that could be a whole nother podcast in itself.
It's daunting, very daunting.
It is. Very much so, yeah. But as you say, when there's an emergency, the time to prepare has passed. What is one thing that you want people listening to take away from that?
Well, you don't rise to the occasion. You default to your training. So when there's an emergency, people who haven't been trained don't have the information that's required to lead. So you need to make sure that there's some sort of not just focus on compliance, but knowing that muscle memory, that situational awareness, and that adaptive thinking that's required.
Yeah. And look, sorry, you go.
It's pretty simple, isn't it? Like, it's too late.
It is.
Too late to prepare when there's an emergency.
Yeah. And I'd love to encourage people listening, next time you do a drill, don't do fire. Do something else that could potentially happen. And for the east coast of Australia, that's a flood. We've gone through, on the mid coast, we've had 5 this year, and It's August. Maybe we've had more than that. So have a look at, how prepared you are for other types of emergencies and pick one instead of going down the traditional fire because that's what we think and it's only 12%. So I love that you've shared that. This has been a really interesting podcast. I've learned a lot. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your experience, Dave. How can people connect with you to learn more if they want to find out more?
Well, I just encourage people to go and have a look at our website. It's really simple. It's fire, F-I-R-E, .training. So it replaces .com.au. So GetFIRE.Training. Our blog has heaps of information on there for people to explore.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Dave. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person at the Coast Coast Safety Summit. So we're coming to you. I cannot wait. And for any of the listeners out there, if you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and share it. We'll see you next time on Under the Rug at Work, where we continue to shine light on issues that are too often overlooked. And we will see you in person at the summit if you can make it. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.